Cara from This Curly Girl Sews. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you a tutorial of how to upcycle a men's tie into a really cute little foam bag with a long crossbody strap. So I'll run through what you're going to need to actually make your tie mobile phone case. You're obviously going to need a tie, just a normal men's tie. It can be silk or polyester or wool, it's entirely up to you. Just a tie. The wider the better, so try not to go for the really narrow ties. You're also going to need to line the bag, so you're going to need lining, so you'll be able to cut 2 pieces plus the flap piece out of your lining fabric. And also for the body, you're going to need a piece of interfacing that's going to be the size of 2 of the square pieces of fabric, because you're going to need to interface your tie, because a tie is actually cut on the bias, which means it stretches that way but doesn't stretch that way. So you just need to stabilize the fabric with some interfacing. It doesn't need to be too heavy, it just needs to be woven interfacing to stop the bias stretch on the tie when you make your bag. You're also going to need scissors, some marking implements, either a pen, this is a auto fade pen, or a pencil or tailor's chalk if you've got a dark coloured tie, some pins, some double-sided tape to make the strap. I will suggest some alternatives when we get to making the strap, because the strap is really fiddly to make. Some pins, a ruler, and some clips just to make it easier to actually stitch the tie together. You can use pins, you don't need clips, but I just find it a lot easier to actually clip the pieces of fabric together rather than push pins through. You're also going to need to fasten your tie somehow. This one hasn't got a fastener on, but you're going to need to fasten the tie. You can either use a bit of Velcro sewn on both pieces, or a button and a buttonhole, a button and a loop. I actually use the plastic cam snaps, which you literally just push through the fabric and then use the tool just to attach them, which is a really easy way to do it. So we've got everything we need now. Let's get started. So we have the tie. What you need to do is actually take the tie apart to start with. So if you look on the back, the tie is stitched all the way down through the middle. So literally just cut the stitches, and they're generally really big loopy stitches. You might want to just cut off the label if your tie has a label, and some ties have a loop as well, that you obviously tuck the thin end of the tie in once the tie is tied. Cut off all of that, so remove this. If you have a silk tie, you may want to actually keep your label to actually show that the tie is silk once it's been stitched. So remove the label and then literally just slip the stitches all the way up through the length of the tie until it's separated. So once you've completely taken out all the stitches, you can just pull the tie apart, unravel it like that, and you'll find there's a load of wadding and interfacing that gives this tie its body. You can just remove that, because you don't need that. So you can just remove that and put that aside to use for some other project. Okay, so what you need to do now is actually iron your tie. As you'll see, the tie is now very mobile because it's cut on the bias. So you just need to be careful just to keep the full width of the tie, iron it so that all the creases are gone. So I've now ironed my tie and it's pretty flat. I haven't unstitched this little bit of lining from the actual end of the tie, because you're going to use that as a flap. So what you need to do now is not stretch it that way at all. Just let the tie go back to its natural state with the fabric. even scrunch it up a little bit, just pat it to get it to ease back to the actual fabric length. So what you need to do is take your triangle piece and just put it on the end, because this is actually going to be the flap. And what you can do is just maybe 1 centimetre longer than that, just cut the point off so that you have that bit of pattern piece, and then about 1 centimetre longer than the pattern piece. So that's your first bit cut out. Now just remove this other little bit of lining that's still attached. Just cut that off because you don't need that. And then take your pattern piece, and you want to be able to get 2 pattern pieces out of this. Now try and do it along the pattern if you can, to keep it straight. So it should just be straight along where you've cut it along the bottom there. Don't want to be doing it to the side, because that's going to have all sorts of weird effects with the stretch in the fabric. So just keep it on the bias. And then you need to make sure that you can get 2 of these out of it. So first one goes to there, second one to there. So that's basically the whole width of the tie there. You can just get 2 out of this. So what you can do is, just with your pins, just pin the pattern piece to the tie, making sure it's running with the pattern of the tie. So just a pin in each corner, like so, and then you can just cut out your first pattern piece. So just go to the top, don't go beyond that because you might cut up into the other piece, and then across there, and then cut off the triangle. So that's your first piece. So you now need to just move that piece down. Again, just pat it so that it goes to its natural stretch, and then place the next piece on there. Again, pin it to the fabric. And then cut out the second pattern piece. And that's basically the body of your foam pouch. You can see if I'd used a narrower tie, it's really hard to have the width to be able to get the pieces wide enough to make the foam pouch. So there's your 2 pieces of body fabric, and this is your flap piece. So what you can do now is, you can see that's very slightly narrower, and when it's sewn it will be even narrower. So just put that on to the tip like that, and then cut the width of the pattern piece. You can pin the piece to the fabric if you prefer. So literally just cut the pattern piece like that, and it will be very slightly longer than that piece. Okay, so that's the body of the bag cut out now. So you have your 2 pieces there and your flap that comes down over to fasten your bag. You also need lining pieces. So again, exactly the same. You need to cut 2 pieces of lining. I've used a cotton sort of linen effect canvas. It's not that thick. I would say it's like a thick quilting cotton. So quilting cotton would be fine. And for the main pieces, you're actually going to need to stabilize them to stop the stretch. So you're going to need to cut just 2 pieces of interfacing. This is just a woven iron-on interfacing. So literally, you just need 2 pieces. So just cut out your interfacing and just cut that into 2. So there I have 2 interfacing pieces. So take your pattern piece off the main bag sections, and you'll see they're mobile. If you started sewing them, they're going to be all over the place. So just attach, this is iron-on interfacing that I'm using. So if you just flatten out your pieces, then get your interfacing and literally iron your interfacing onto your pattern pieces. I don't interface the lining because you don't want the bag to be too thick, and this is quite a nice weight lining I'm using anyway. So I don't interface them, I literally just interface the actual body of the tie, the main bag section. So I've ironed my interfacing now to both of the tie sections, and they're a lot more stable now and they don't give as much as they did. One thing to be careful of when you're ironing your interfacing to the tie is don't have the iron too hot. I had it on a silk setting, which took a little bit longer for the interfacing to actually bond to the fabric, but then you don't risk obviously affecting your tie, particularly if it is silk, although having said that, the polyester ones would probably melt, so just be a bit careful, don't have the iron too hot. So what you need to do now is take your little lining triangle and actually iron the seam allowances over. So if you just fold over the edges by just under 1 centimetre or just over 1/2 inch, so just about that much, and you need to fold over all of the edges, so not the bottom one but all 4 of the edges around the top. I'll just go and do that now. Okay, so I've just ironed the edges of the lining fabric over. Where the top point is, you may just want to get your scissors and just literally put it into the corner and just snip that edge off, just to make it a bit more lightweight and not so bulky at the top there. These are fine because these just go down like that. So what you need to do now is take your outer fabric flap piece and actually do the same. So just down those 2 raw edges down the side. You don't need to do it along here because obviously that's the point of the tie anyway. But just down these side edges here, you just need to fold that over just under 1 centimetre, just over 1/4 inch, and actually press both the sides down as well. So I've now ironed or pressed just those 2 side edges. So what you're going to do is actually attach the lining flap to the main flap. So with that edge pressed down, you can either pin it, or I'm actually going to just use some clips just to clip that in place. And again, carefully just fold the points so it will be on slightly on the inside. So again, just attach like that, and then on the other side exactly the same. So what you'll have is a piece that looks like that. So you've got the lovely edge of the tie where they do the lovely corner point there, and then from the other side you won't see the lining at all. So what you need to do now is stitch close to the edge on the lining, which will be just in from the edge on the other side. Now, depending on whether you want your stitching to show or not, obviously you can use a contrast stitch, or you can use one that just matches either the lining or the outside fabric. So I'll just go and stitch all the way around now that flap. You don't need to stitch along the bottom. So I've now stitched all the way around there. You may just want to press that again just to make sure it's flat, and then obviously you need to cut off your ends of thread, and you can also trim the tie back to the edge of the lining so that they're basically both the same length, and that's basically your flap finished. So next you need to construct your strap. Now the strap construction is actually quite fiddly, so if you're not a confident sewer, I would suggest getting some narrow webbing or ribbon or something like that to attach as your strap. However, if you're a bit more confident, then have a go at using the rest of the tie to make your strap. Now, the problem is the tie that you've got left over is not actually long enough to make a crossbody strap. So what you need to do is actually cut it down through the middle to split it in half, which then makes it really very, very fiddly because it's very narrow to actually make the strap, which is why I'm saying you may want to just use webbing. So what you need to do is just fold that in half and then mark the midway point. So that's 10 centimeters there, so that'll be 5 centimeters. And the midway point here is, that's 9 centimeters, so that's 4.5. So let's do it here as well. So that's 4.5. So just mark down through the midpoint of your tie. So what I'm going to do is, just so that it doesn't move, I'm just going to pin the tie just down through, and then I'm going to cut along the line I just marked, which is basically cutting the tie in half down through the middle. Don't need the pointy bit at the end, so you can just cut that off. Right. What? Best thing to do is pin along the straight edge, because you know that edge now down through that you cut down through the middle is straight. So if you just pin the tie in place so that both the straight edges are down through the middle. Now what you need to do now is make this edge the same. So the narrowest part of the tie is going to be this end. So for me, that's 4.5 centimeters. They're both 4.5 centimeters, thankfully. So if you go here, mark 4.5 centimeters. I mean, I suggest you try and keep it. I suggest you try and keep the maximum width of the tie you have. Mine happens to be 4.5 centimeters. So I'm just working with that, and I'm going to make the strap to that specification. So again, just draw the line and then cut away from you along the line just to make the whole narrow end of the tie the same width. Cut off those little hanging off bits where it's joined together. You will notice there is actually a lot of joins in the tie as well. Just ignore those because you're just going to imagine that it's one piece of fabric and they're not actually there. Again. So both of these are the same width now. So take your pins out, and what you're going to do is join these two bits as though they were bias tape. So if you put one at right angles to you and then put the other one at right angles so that there's a square at the end, what you need to do is actually stitch from that point to that point across there. So you're going to stitch across there, and that's actually going to join it like bias binding. So just pin that together and then just stitch across there, and then when you fold that out, basically you'll have a continual length. So let me just stitch across that join. So as you can see, I've just stitched across that join there. So when I fold the fabric out, it basically makes a continual strip of fabric. So you need to cut off that triangle close to the stitching, cut off all your ends, and then you have a continual piece of fabric. What you need to do next is, with this continual piece of fabric, fold it in half and press it. So as you can see, I've pressed that so that the strap is in half. So what you need to do now, which is the fiddly bit, is fold the outside in, not to the middle, just a little bit, just maybe 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 centimetre, and then do the same on the other side and press that hem in. So you do that and then fold it in half and then press that so it makes a narrow strap. This is really, really fiddly. If you've got a bias binder maker, it's probably easier to use that, to actually just run it through the bias thing and just iron it as you pull it out. But if you haven't, it's a really fiddly, and you may want to do one side first and then do the other side and then fold it in half again. So I've now actually pressed the strap so that the two edges are folded over as well, so that when you fold it in the middle again, basically it forms the strap. I did cheat and I used a bias binder maker, which basically you thread your fabric in that end, and as you pull it through, it folds it over so you can iron it as it's coming out the other end, and it basically makes it like this. It basically makes it so that it's like this. So what I'm going to do now is actually use the double-sided tape. You don't need to use this, it just makes it a lot easier for me. So use the double-sided tape, and actually where you folded over the edge there, just stick it down onto the edge all the way along the edge of your folded edge there. Then what you're going to do is, once you've done it all the way along, peel the tape off and then actually fold the other edge onto the double-sided tape so it sticks it together, so it makes it a lot easier for you to sew. Right, so now I've done the double-sided sticky tape all the way down through and folded it over again, and this is the result. So what I need to do now is actually top stitch down both sides of the strap just to secure that all in place. Now I will say this is very, very fiddly. If you don't have double-sided sticky tape, you would need to use either clips or pins, but it will be very, very tricky to sew. This is why I'm saying, unless you're very confident as a sewer and doing very fiddly things, I would opt for a ribbon or a webbing strap rather than actually making the strap. But I'll now finish off making the strap, and then we can move on to actually constructing the bag. So I've now done the top stitching on the whole length of the strap. You now need to measure the length of the strap to how long you actually need it. For me, I always do my straps at 135. So if we just measure 135 centimetres, so 135 centimetres, which is 53 inches, and then just cut off the end of the strap. So the strap is now the correct length. So what we can do now is actually start constructing the actual main part of the bag. So take your two main fabric sections, the actual tie, and take your flap. Now, if you've got different design on your back and front, you need to take the back section and actually with the flap facing right sides together, so the tie fabric to the tie fabric. So your lining fabric would be facing up if your tie fabric is facing up on the workplace. You need to clip that together so that the right sides are together, and this is the back of the bag, and then this is going to be the front. So what you need to do then is just baste the flap into place. So just stitch along the top of there to actually attach the flap to the back section. Let me go and stitch that. So I've just stitched along the edge there to attach the back to the flap, which will come down over the front like that. So now you need to cut off all the ends and then attach the bag together. So if you lay the front part of the bag onto the back, clip around the edge, and you're going to sew all the way around the bag, just leaving that top section open so that you can turn it in the right way. So now you need to stitch all the way down here, all the way down here, and all the way around there. Now I would have your seam allowance at about 3/4 centimetre, which is roughly just over half an inch. Just over 1/4 inch. So I'd have your seam allowance set at just under a centimetre, which is just over 1/4 inch. You need it quite close to the edge. So you're going to be stitching sort of this close to the edge. What you need to do, just make sure, is you don't catch in the flap on the top bit, because you need to make sure that that's out. So when you're sewing, if you could just push the flap out of the way so that it makes sure you just sew down the edge of the actual body of the bag and not sew the flap in. You don't want to sew on the flap at all on this section. So I've now stitched all the way around the main section of the bag, apart from the top, which is open. So what you need to do is just clip away at the corners, being careful not to clip the stitches, just to give a bit of room so you can poke your corners out so that your corners will be nice and square. So if you turn this in the right way now, and just get something a little bit pointy but not too pointy. I normally use the end of a paintbrush because it's pointy but not too pointy. So yeah, so you just push that out just so that your corners are all right. So this is the main body of your bag, pretty much done. So once you've done the main body, you then need to, so once your strap is made and the right length, what you need to do is just attach it to the outside of your bag. So just line it up with that side seam, have it very slightly poking above the top, and then just clip it in place. Run your hands along the strap to make sure that it doesn't have any twists or kinks in it. And again, do exactly the same on the other side. So it just goes below, just goes above, sorry, the top of the bag. What you're going to do now is just stitch the strap into place so that it's secured. Move on to your two lining pieces. So if you put them right sides together, what you need to do is stitch them down about 3 or 4 centimetres, again close to the edge, with about half a centimetre or so seam allowance, exactly the same seam allowance as you had on the main body of the bag. So there, as you can see, I've just stitched just down to there. So literally just 3 or 4 centimetres, an inch or so down from the top. So once you've done the lining stitched just at the top, what you need to do is actually open up that flap like so, then take your bag with the strap hanging down and the flap folded down, and actually push it up through the hole so that it's inside the lining. So the lining and the outer bag will actually be right sides together. Now, all being well, the lining should be the same size opening as the top of the bag. So what you're going to do is actually just clip this in place around the top, and then you're going to stitch all around that top of the bag. So clip it in place all the way around, like so, and then stitching from the inside, so put your machine inside and then stitch all the way around the inside to secure the lining to the outer bag. So once you've stitched all the way around and stitched the lining to the outer, basically just have a quick check. So just pull your lining down just to make sure there's no tucks, or you've caught the fabric or caught the strap in or folded up the flap or anything like that. That looks good. So what you can do now is actually just sew up the rest of the lining. So what you need to do is just turn your bag inside itself. The strap can just be hanging down, that's fine, because you're not actually going to sew up all of the lining because you need to obviously turn the bag through. So get the sides lined up and basically clip the sides down the sides like that. Leave the bottom open. Move the strap so that it's coming out of the bottom. And again, down the other side, just clip the side seam together all the way down. And then what you're going to do is actually sew down that side and down that side. Leave the bottom open, so that's why you have the strap in there, to remind yourself, don't sew along the bottom, you need to leave that open. So again, just sew down the sides with the same seam allowance you had on the outer bag, or very slightly less, very slightly more seam allowance, just to make the bag on the inside very slightly smaller so it fits inside better. So I've sewn down either side of the lining now. So what you need to do is just turn your bag through the lining like so, and pull everything through to the right side. So there's the lining, there's the main bag. Just make sure your corners are out properly. And then all that's left to do, apart from cut off all your ends, is actually sew up the bottom of the bag. So just take the lining where it's open at the bottom, turn it in on itself like that to form a seam. And then what you're going to do is just sew along the bottom, catching those two things together just to close the hole at the bottom of the lining. So I've just sewn to close that at the bottom of the lining. So what you need to do now is just turn your bag lining inside the bag. You may need to pull it out just a little bit to get it to go down fully inside the bag. So just use your paintbrush or whatever you're using to turn it in the right way, just to get those corners out in the lining as well. And then basically the bag is done. So you just need to iron it and then attach whatever you're going to use to actually fasten it. I'm going to use these plastic cam snaps, so I just pick one that I think goes with it. So I'm going to go with the blue one, I think. I'm going to go with the blue one. So I need two of the tops, and I need a female and a male stud. And these are really easy. These are really easy to do. So literally just pick where you want it on the front and just put a mark, and then put another mark underneath where that fastens. So basically your 2 marks are where you're going to put them. So just put that through the fabric, like so. And then you need to just squeeze that onto the fabric, onto the plastic. So there we go, there's the male attached, and then the female comes up through both the lining and the main fabric. So that comes up through that. Put the female on there, and again just clench it, squeeze it with the thing very gently, just to press the plastic in. There we go, and there's it fastened. So there's your mobile phone case with plastic cam snap fastener. Put your mobile phone in there, or put your glasses in there, and obviously you can wear that then around your neck or over your shoulder, a crossbody, however long you did your strap, and it's perfect. I hope you enjoyed making your mobile phone case or glasses case out of the old tie. I hope it was easy enough for you to follow. Obviously, any questions, please pop them below, and I'll get to them as quickly as I can to answer any queries you have. If you liked the video, please click like below, and also subscribe to my channel if you want to see more upcycles, and also sewing garments. I'm also a thrifter, so I do regularly upcycle thrifted garments that are too big, or I want to change, or where I just love the fabric and I make them into something else. Happy sewing!